let me show you how to make a large moss wall installation. This was my concept for the project. I knew it was going to be 3 offset panels that each ran 8 foot by 1.5 feet. I'm a visual person, so to get started, I'll tape those dimensions to the wall to get an idea of how big this will be. I'll be using super moss preserved moss for this project, starting with this reindeer moss in chartreuse. I picked this one for its bright color and squishy texture. I'm also using this sheet moss because it's nice and flat. It'll be a good contrast in color and in texture. And finally, this mood moss, which is nice and pillowy and also has little bits of each color of the other 2 mosses and will help tie everything together. I'm using this construction paper to represent the 3 different colors of moss I'm using in the project, and I'll tape it to the wall to get an idea of how I want the moss to flow. Because of how big this project is, I can't just lay the moss out on the panels like I normally would. So using the construction paper is a great hack for me to get a good visual of how I want everything to be laid out. Now, to make the panels, I'm using this outside corner molding that I'm cutting at a 45-degree miter to create a frame. I'm using wood glue to secure the corners. I'll also run a bead of glue all the way along the inside ledge of the frame. This ledge will hold my 1/4-inch plywood, and that'll be the base of the panels where I attach the moss. Once I've made sure that the pieces are square, I'll hold them together by running a set of staples all along the perimeter. And although it looks unsightly now, this side of the panel will eventually be covered in moss, and you'll no longer be able to see any of the staples. I'll fill in any gaps with wood putty, and once it dries, I'll sand it smooth with a sanding block. I'll then flip the panel over so I can attach 1/2 of the French cleat. These will make installing the panels so much easier. My cordless screwdriver from Hodo Tools made quick work of installing these cleats on the back side of the panels. I then painted the front of the panels with a couple coats of black paint. That way there would be no wood peeking through any of the moss. And once that was fully dry, I went in with a couple coats of polycrylic top coat just to seal the frame. The second half of the French cleat comes with a level, which is super handy when mounting it to the wall. I drilled the screws directly into the brick wall of my studio, and of course that did not leave a tight fit. This wall is not the permanent home for this piece, and I had seen a hack on the internet once where you could break off skewer sticks into the hole to make for a tighter fit. So I broke a couple pieces off into each hole and then reattached the cleat, and sure enough, it worked. Then I can remove the construction paper that I used to come up with the layout for the moss. And don't worry, I took a photo of the design so I can reference it later. And I'll save this paper for my next project. I'll then slide the panels into place. And using the photo as a guide, I'll draw on my design with chalk. Hodo Tools is also the maker of this glue gun, and this project was the first time that I used it. And I have to say, the fact that this is cordless is a game changer. I'm applying the moss in sections, and I'll start with the sheet moss. This is a natural product, so it's important to take out all the pine needles and any debris that might be in the moss. I'm using these black hot glue sticks to attach the moss to the panels, and these 8-inch sticks mean that I'll have to reload less often. I'm running a bead of glue along one side of the moss and then attaching it to the panel. Then I'll peel back the top and apply more glue to make sure that it's fully adhered. And I'll hold it in place for a couple seconds while it dries. I'll continue to add more pieces of sheet moss, paying special attention to make sure that I glue down the seams. I'm selecting moss that roughly follows the design, but ultimately letting the moss be my guide. I'll lay down all of my sheet moss before moving on to the second layer, mood moss. They pack a lot of this moss into a box, which is great, but sometimes it needs to be reshaped. Let me show you how I do that. I'll start by removing any debris. Then I'll create a mixture of 1 part vegetable glycerin and 3 parts distilled water. And then give it a good shake. I'll spray the moss down with the solution. and then I can easily reshape it. The vegetable glycerin will replace the moss's natural moisture content and leave it feeling fluffy. For the mood moss, I like to use 2 different types of adhesive. School glue to get into all the nooks and crannies and seal the back, and hot glue to adhere it to the panels. I'll hold it to the panel for a couple seconds while it dries, and then add additional pieces. This part of the project is like doing a puzzle. I'm selecting pieces that make sense for the design, but again, I'm letting the moss be the hero, letting it speak to me and influence its placement. I'll place all of the mood moss before moving on to the 3rd layer, the reindeer moss. I'll detach the bottom of the moss so it doesn't stand up so tall. Then I'll apply a generous amount of glue so it adheres to the panel. And I'll trim back any of the fluff so it doesn't hang over the edge of the frame. This layer of the project definitely takes the longest because it has so many little pieces, but it is the most satisfying. I would recommend wearing gloves when handling the reindeer moss. It is dyed and it could potentially stain your fingers. This project was made using preserved moss, so it doesn't need water to continue to look lush and happy for years to come. But keep it out of direct sunlight so that it doesn't fade.